Welcome to Are You Quizzing Me? I am Vineet Nair with my co-host Aditya Kashyap. This is a quizzing trivia podcast show. Join us as we dive deep into history, science, pop culture, and so much more. Let's get quizzing. And we're back for episode number 82 of Are You Quizzing Me? Your favorite quizzing and trivia podcast show. Aditya and I are back for another round of quizzing. And let's start off this episode without any further ado with the audience question. For those who came in late and for those who are new, the audience question is a question I ask at the beginning of every episode, the answer to which I give at the end of the episode. So try and guess the answer and stay tuned till the end to see if you're right. So the audience question for today is, which word, meaning to plan together secretly, is derived from the Latin for to breathe with or breathe together, having the same root as the word respiration? Let me repeat the question. Which word, meaning to plan together secretly, is derived from the Latin for breathe with or breathe together, having the same root as the word respiration? I will answer this question at the end of today's episode. Now it's time for our regular round of quizzing, and Aditya Kashyap, why don't you start us off for this 82nd episode of Are You Quizzing Me?
Fun. It feels like it's been a while since we did a good old regular Are You Quizzing Me episode.
Yeah.
Vineet, you and me kicking it old school styles.
Yes.
82nd episode. Every time I say a number, I'm just like, how have we managed to reach this?
Yeah.
So that is a question for us to ponder upon, which perhaps doesn't have an answer. But there are some questions which do have an answer.
Aha.
The first of those questions I'm going to be asking for this episode has to do with one of my absolute favorite things. And no, it's not a listicle this time. It is a pun.
Oh, God.
I have a pun for you, my good sir.
No!
You have to guess the pun in this case. I'm going to name three people. I'm going to tell you what these three people are famous for. You might have heard of some of them. I'm sure you have heard of some of them. And you have to tell me, what was this group of three people called? What was the nickname that was given to them, which is a pun? So the first that I'm going to mention is Dian Fossey. Dian Fossey, for anybody who doesn't know, was an American primatologist and conservationist who is known for undertaking an extensive study of mountain gorillas from 1966 until her unfortunate murder in 1985. Absolutely devastating. A lovely human being, I imagine, doing some great work for the planet, was murdered, but did do a significant contribution to science and hopefully will be remembered for that. The first person is Dian Fossey. The next person I'm going to talk about is Birutė Galdikas. Birutė Galdikas, who is a Lithuanian-Canadian anthropologist, primatologist, conservationist, ethologist, and author. Also a professor at Simon Fraser University. She is recognized as a leading authority on orangutans. Now, Vineet, I'm going to let you guess the third person. I think you perhaps have an idea of who the third person in this list might be. The first one was a lady who is known for studying gorillas. The second one, a scientist known for studying orangutans. The third one would be the most famous of them all.
Chimpanzees?
And who would that be?
Okay. Am I supposed to know somebody big scientist among the chimpanzee community? I don't know. I'm blanking. Who are we talking about?
All right. But well, hey, points for getting chimpanzee off the fly. This would be Jane Goodall.
Oh, yes. Okay.
One of the most famous people who has studied chimpanzees.
Yes.
So Jane Goodall, who was formerly the Baroness Jane Goodall, is an English zoologist, primatologist, anthropologist, considered the world's foremost expert on chimpanzees after 60 years studying the social and family interactions of wild chimpanzees. It is breathtaking and it is mind-boggling just the amount of work this one single person has done for the field of chimpanzee study. Now, three people I mentioned, Vineet. Tell me what these three people are known as collectively. The first one was Dian Fossey, who has studied mountain gorillas. Second one was Birutė Galdikas, who has studied orangutans. And the last one, Jane Goodall, who has studied chimpanzees. What is this group of three called?
This is going to be some clever pun which I'm never going to be able to guess. Okay. This is what I hate when you give me these pun questions. It just exposes me for the straight thinker that I am. Okay. Monkey men, Monkey Kong, monkey women, 3 monkeys. Is it like a play on 12 monkeys, like 3 monkeys? No, I don't think they would be called monkeys.
No, not at all, not at all. I'll give you the other name that they're known by, which is not really going to lead you to the answer, but it's just an interesting side trivia. So all 3 of them were kind of, I guess, mentored by a Kenyan British paleoanthropologist and archaeologist who was also very interested in this particular field of study, who went by the name of Louis Leakey. So these women were also called Leakey's angels. What are they called apart from Leakey's angels? We need to think of what were they studying? Who were they studying?
They're studying primates.
And how many of them were there?
3. Primates. 3 mates.
Yay, there we go.
Oh God. They called 3 mates?
The trimates.
The trimates. Oh God. Oh God.
Primates was the name that was given to these 3 women, Jane Goodall, Dian Fossey, and Birutė Galdikas. 3 women who have changed the study of primates and have contributed significantly to that particular science. And just because it combines my love for nature and for sciences with my absolute devotion to puns, I had to ask you this, Vineet.
Yes, I know.
I don't even think this qualifies as a regular trivia question. And I'll tell you what, my dad's favorite, who is a regular listener, shout out to my father, my dad's favorite question, I think, so far, the one that he has made a point to call me up after listening to the episode and telling me how much he loved it, was the pun on Air Horse 1.
I knew it. It just had to be it.
The plane that was used to transport these racehorses. Yeah. It's called Air Horse 1.
To be fair, that is a much superior pun to trimates. I'm going to put it out there.
Come on. Trimates is a great pun as well. Vineet, I challenge you on that. Trimates is a phenomenal pun.
No. Air Horse 1 now. That brings me a chuckle every time.
You know what I say to that, Vineet? I say, nay.
Oh, God. Okay. That was a fantastic pun, but I'm going to go the most serious route. Have you heard of the International Organization for Standardization, also known as ISO?
I have heard of that.
Yes, so it's an independent, non-governmental, international standard development organization composed of representatives from the national standards organizations of member countries. It was founded on 23rd February 1947 and as of July 2024 has published over 25,000 international standards covering almost all aspects of technology and manufacturing. So what the ISO does is it develops and publishes international standards for easiness on end user or commoners market, like availability in technical and non-technical fields, including everything from manufactured products and technology to food safety, transport, IT, agriculture, and healthcare. Just to give you a few examples, ISO 9001, which is the one that most people must have heard, is a quality management system for organizations. So if an organization is certified to or accredited as to having passed the criteria for ISO 9001, you can be assured that they have great quality management systems in place, right? Similarly, the medical laboratories, we follow the standards of ISO 15189, which is quality and competence in medical laboratories. So this is the background to the question. Now coming to the question itself. ISO 3301 was originally laid down in 1980. That's 1980. And a revision was published in December 2019. This standard is not meant to define the proper method, but rather to document a procedure where meaningful sensory comparisons can be made. The protocol has been criticized for omitting any mention of pre-warming. Ireland was the only country to object and objected on technical grounds. The work was the winner of the parodic Ig Nobel Prize for Literature in 1999. So, what does ISO 3301 set the standard for? I can see that stupid grin on your face, which just tells me I've wasted a lot of time coming up with this question just to have it bomb and you just crack it on the first try. But go ahead, make your own day.
I will make my own day. It is the standard for making tea.
Yes,
ISO
yes.
3301 is the standard for making tea. This is a piece of trivia I encountered weeks ago. And here's a little bit of a look under the hood for how this podcast is made. Because whenever I decide that, okay, I'm going to ask these questions this episode, I always keep a couple of them backed up. And I'm like, okay, all of these 3, 4 are great. And this extra one, just in case, one of them I can't use. And ISO 3301 has been on my list for the last 20 episodes, I believe. I always have it open. And I've just like, okay, you know what? It's a great question, but I'll ask it at some point in the future. So last 20 episodes, I've not asked this question. And you just went for it this time. So I can't really take too much credit for it. I just encountered this piece of trivia a while back and I wanted to ask you this. So it's the standard for making tea.
Yeah, so for the benefit of our audience, ISO 3301, or rather the new one is ISO 13103, sets a standard for brewing tea. Now, the standard is not meant to define the proper method for brewing tea intended for general consumption, but rather it is made to document a tea brewing procedure where meaningful sensory comparisons can be made. An example of such a test would be a taste test to establish which blend of teas to choose for a particular brand or label in order to maintain a consistent tasting brewed drink from harvest to harvest. It may not be the best way of making tea, but it defines a specific order and method in making tea so that you can make a consistent comparison each and every time. So there's an actual standard for that. Somebody actually sat down and made, I don't know how many tens of pages, just a standard to internationally follow on how to brew tea, which I found quite nerdy and interesting at the same time. So I thought I'd stump you with it, but then you are unstumpable. You have no stump.
Honored that you think that I can't be stumped, because that will be proven wrong pretty shortly, I'm sure, in this episode itself. But speaking of people who do contribute a lot to this podcast without sometimes coming to the fore, that would be our lovely listeners. And one of them has sent me a question. So thank you so much to this listener, Arjun Shri Kumar. Arjun Shri Kumar sent me a couple of questions. I'm going to ask one of them today, Vineet. And I'm very excited, not because the question is great, because the question is a fun question, but more importantly, Arjun Shri Kumar, and I'm going to quote him here, his email to us. Shout out to any of our listeners who want to send us an email with a question. You can send it to areyouquizzingme@gmail.com. So Arjun Shri Kumar's email to us said, "Hi Aditya, great work on the podcast. For me, this is hands down the best trivia or quizzing podcast I have heard." That is very sweet. Thank you, Arjun. The next line goes, "I also appreciate the fun aspect of the podcast, including your question of the week, which I've noticed you're not posing anymore in recent episodes." Wait, for the benefit of any of our listeners who have only joined us in the last few, perhaps weeks, maybe in a couple of last months, they might not know that at one point this podcast used to end with me asking a question which was not a trivia question, which was just a stupid pun. And I didn't even have an answer for it. And I would just think of it in the intervening week before we recorded the next. And then I would give that answer at the beginning of the next episode. And we have stopped doing that because some of the listener feedback was that they didn't know if that was real trivia or they were getting confused.
Yeah.
But hey, at least I know there was one fan. So Arjun, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. You have made my day, my week, my month, probably my year, just with that compliment. But coming to the real meat of the matter, Arjun's question, and I'm going to read it verbatim.
Okay.
X is a term used for a mercenary in the Ottoman army, recruited by sultans to boost the regular army. They did not receive payment or wear a uniform. They lived off of the loot seized from civilians, forming a formidable, undisciplined cavalry with a reputation for brutal violence. They were especially active in the Crimean War and the Balkan Wars of the 19th century. The term in Ottoman Turkish itself means one whose head is turned, or it could also mean damaged head or crazy head. What is this term X?
The first thing that comes to mind when you say that is Janissaries. They were like the shock troops of the Ottoman Empire, the Janissaries. Am I anywhere close?
No, it's not the Janissaries.
Okay. No, I'll need some kind of clue then.
At this point, I have to tell you why I really like this question and I had to pick this question to ask. Is because the hint is a really fun hint provided by Arjun himself. The hint reads, it's a commonly used swear word or insult by Captain Haddock in the Tintin comics.
Blistering blue barnacles, no?
That is the alliteration that you want to focus on.
Yes. Give me 2 seconds. What is it called? Something. I keep remembering bazooka for some reason. Something similar, right? I can't remember the exact one.
You're agonizingly close. It is very close to the word bazooka.
I can't remember it. I remember it's something very similar to bazooka, but I can't remember the actual thing.
Okay. The word basically goes bashi bazook.
Bashi bazook. Okay. Bashi bazook. Yeah.
Bashi bazook. So, for any of our Tintin fans, you would remember Captain Haddock in his rage fits would list off alliterative expletives or close to expletives as you can for a children's comic. And a lot of them were crazy sounding words that were just bunched together. Blistering barnacles, billions of blue blistering barnacles comes to mind. Thousands of thundering typhoons. And bashi bazook was another thing that he used to say. Wow, what a lovely piece of trivia, right? Like, what was he actually talking about? Bashi bazook were mercenaries in the Ottoman army who used to be renowned for their brutality and the violence, and also were paid by the loot that they would gather from civilians. That is the origin of the term bashi bazook. I also have to, on behalf of Arjun, give a unofficial PCR. I love PCR. I never thought of that. Pop culture recommendation.
Okay.
Which is Blistering Barnacles, which is an A to Z dictionary of the rants, rambles, and rages of Captain Haddock. It's a coffee table book by Albert Gold. And I haven't read it, but from the sounds of it, I think it is probably going to be brilliant. So it's something I think people should know that Arjun wants to recommend. Blistering Barnacles, an A to Z dictionary of the rants, rambles, and rages of Captain Haddock, a coffee table book. Unofficial PCR.
Nice. Very nice. Okay, I see your bashi bazook, and I'm going to raise you to another level of pop culture. Basically, you gave me a clue on comics, and I'm going to go one step further. Where you have one comic, which is Tintin, I'm going to hundreds of comics. So a comic book convention, or Comic-Con, is a fan convention emphasizing comic books and comic book culture, in which comic book fans gather to meet creators, experts, and each other. Though the San Diego Comic-Con is the most famous, it is not the oldest. The first recorded official comic book convention occurred in 1964 in New York City. Known as the New York Comic-Con, it was held on July 24th, 1964 at the Workman Circle building. A one-day convention organized by 16-year-old Bernie Bupnis and fellow enthusiast Ron Fratkin. Official guests included Steve Ditko, who you may know as the co-creator of Spider-Man and creator of Doctor Strange, as well as Tom Gill, who was the artist of the Lone Ranger comic. There were reports of over 100 attendees. My question to you, Aditya, is who was the first person to sign up for and buy a ticket to the first ever Comic-Con? Let me repeat that last part. Who was the first ever person to sign up and buy a ticket for the first ever Comic-Con?
Would it be a very, very strange answer to just say, was it Spike Lee?
No, why Spike Lee? I'm just curious.
Oh, sorry. What am I saying? Spike Lee.
I'm like, what does a director of Inside Man have to do with this?
Can we cut that part out? Because I wanted to say Stanley, and now I'm going to sound like such an idiot.
No, we are not.
This is what I mean. I was sounding smart so far. We were 20 minutes in, and I was sounding really smart, and then I have to shoot myself in the foot and say Spike Lee instead of Stanley, like an absolute buffoon. Billions of blistering buffoons. Okay, yes, I meant Stanley. Would it be ridiculous to say Stanley?
Not ridiculous, but it's not Stanley.
Okay, but am I in the right space? Is it like somebody famous in the comic book?
This person is famous in Yeah, I mean, like he's not just exclusively comic book, but pop culture. This person's very famous in pop culture. Some of his works have been adapted into comics, I would put it that way.
Could you tell me, sorry again, which year was this first ever Comic-Con?
This was 1964.
1964. Some of his work has been adapted into a comic book, a pop culture legend from the sounds of it.
Just to say that, you were not completely wrong in that Stanley did have a connection to the first ever Comic-Con. This is a piece of side trivia. His secretary, who was quite famous in her own right, was called Flo Steinberg. She was known as the fabulous Flo Steinberg. She was Stanley's secretary, and she also was one of the guests at the first ever Comic-Con held in New York in 1964. But the person who was the first ever person to sign up for the first ever Comic-Con was not Stanley. Do you want a clue?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, so Star Wars' Chewbacca. The appearance of Chewbacca was based off an illustration from one of the books written by this person.
Oh, interesting. No, I have absolutely no clue who Chewbacca is based off of. I was going to say, is it the person who played Chewbacca, which I know was some actor? But
Peter Weller, I think his name was. I will also give an additional clue who was almost a fixture at later Comic-Cons in the 2010s. But at that time, instead of being an attendee, he was up on stage. I'll just give you a little more detail on Chewbacca's appearance. Chewbacca's final appearance in the movie Star Wars was based on a 1976 piece of concept art by Ralph McQuarrie, which in turn was based on illustration by John Shawner for this person's novel, which was called And 7 Times Never Kill a Man.
And 7 Times Never Kill a Man?
Yeah.
Is that the book that Satkun Maaf is based on?
I don't think so, because it's a science fiction thing.
I was going to say that is based off of a Ruskin Bond novel or a book or whatever story.
Yeah, something, yeah. Coming back to this, this person that we are talking about started off his career as a hard science fiction writer, but today is known more for fantasy, high fantasy.
The only person who fits that bill is George R.R. Martin. I know he started off with science fiction and has moved to fantasy. Is he the one?
Yes. George R.R. Martin was the first ever person to buy a ticket for the first ever Comic-Con. He confirmed this at an interview. In his words, it was held in New York City in 1964. It cost $1.50 to sign up for it, which was a lot of money, like a dozen comic books. And I had to spend more money taking the bus from Bayonne, New Jersey, hoping I could find this place in the depths of Greenwich Village.
Nice.
So George R.R. Martin was the first person.
I have to ask though, because I have heard this piece of trivia and you are a bigger Star Wars nerd than I am, so you probably will be able to correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Chewbacca was based off of Lucas's dog.
No, they wanted a kind of shaggy, doggy, wolfy appearance, but they wanted it to be a kind of physically imposing humanoid structure. So the final appearance was based off this particular illustration. The whole bandolier and being 7 feet tall and all those things.
Okay, so this is why probably I was confused. I just pulled up this piece of trivia. Chewbacca was inspired by Lucas's dog, an Alaskan Malamute named Indiana. She would sit in the passenger seat of his car while he was driving, and he referred to her as his co-pilot. Chewbacca's name was derived from the Russian word sobaka, or however it is pronounced in Russian, which means dog. So this is just a little bit of Chewbacca trivia for any of our Star Wars fans over there. An interesting fact, yeah. So I guess the final appearance obviously was
the final
named.
appearance, yeah, of the, with the, basically if you look at the original illustration, I've seen the illustration from Ralph McQuarrie's concept art. That he was inspired by John Shawner's illustration for a G.R.R. Martin novelette. So that concept of a 7 foot, 8 foot tall kind of shaggy dog-like creature with a bandolier, that comes from a George R.R. Martin book illustration.
Love that. Oh, cool. So Chewbacca originated from a dog, but inspired by George R.R. Martin. Wow. It's like, I love these worlds colliding.
Yeah.
Great piece of trivia. History is amazing. And that is my segue. History is amazing. To my question. And this is a question from the 18th century, Vineet. So we are going way, way back. How much do you know about the thoroughbred racehorses from 18th century?
Absolutely nothing.
I love it. Great. Hopefully this will take you a little effort. A particular racehorse who won over 25 races, let's call this racehorse X, won over 25 races and placed higher than some of the most prominent racehorses of his time, was an important sire whose leading runners included Epsom Derby winners Waxy, Champion, Tyrant. These are names perhaps famous among the racehorse community. He is best known, apart from his racing credentials, he is best known for the unusual spelling of his name. So I'm going to tell you the origin of the name, and then you're going to tell me the name of this particular horse. There are many different theories of how this name might have originated. According to the most common one, Birutė, who was the breeder, Birutė intended to call the young colt Y. He instructed the stable boy to write the name on a feed bin. So he instructed the stable boy to write Y on the feed bin. The stable boy spelled the name phonetically and hence ended up with the name X. So he misspelled it and he ended up calling it X, which amused Birutė so much that he adopted that name X instead, or he adopted that particular spelling instead. What is the name? Do you want to take a wild guess to begin with? Because right now I don't think I've given you enough clues, but take a wild guess to begin with.
See, the thing is, when it comes to racehorses, I know just a few, like Secretariat and Seabiscuit. But those are like from the 20th century, maybe late 19th century. But this is the 18th century. I can't think of anything from the 18th century. Nothing. The only other kind of famous horse that comes to mind is Black Beauty. But it was not a racehorse.
Okay, you might not have heard of this particular horse. I had never even heard of this name before, but this piece of trivia is just too good to pass up on. He was named after a vegetable, the first to be grown in space.
Lettuce?
No.
What's the first vegetable to be grown in space? And nothing comes to me, like beetroot?
Also famously portrayed in a science fiction work.
Potato.
Yes, so Y is potato. Do you want to take a guess as to what X is?
So potato. Is it something to do with that? No.
It's a little stupider than that.
Okay. Potato. Potato.
I almost think of it as if he was trying to spell it, or he was trying to break it down phonetically, and he ended up with the spelling.
Potato.
You're saying it like you're saying it. I don't know if you're hearing it. I wonder if our listeners can tell what the answer is right now, because you're literally saying it out loud.
Wait, I'm just saying potato differently. That's all.
Okay. Let me try to say it once with the emphasis, and let's see if we figure it out.
Okay.
Pot 8-0.
Pot 8-0?
Yeah, if that helps.
Pot 8-0. Pot 8-0?
Close.
I don't know. Okay. Pot 80.
I will put you out of your misery. The stable boy heard it as pot 8-0. So he wrote the word pot followed by 8 O's. He thought the guy was saying pot followed by 8 O's.
That is just so dumb. So what did they call him? Potu!
So he was Potu. I don't know. Potu? I guess Potu.
Potu!
That's also the sound he made when he rushed past you on the race course.
Do you remember the time when our podcast actually used to be much more serious? Yeah, neither do I, but still I just hope that was at some point that, some listeners listening to this might think like, okay, I just want to show you we do have serious episodes, but this is just a particularly silly one.
And I take my comedy seriously. Also, I should have done this earlier, but let me do it now. This question was not my question. This was provided to us by another lovely listener, Bishnu. Bishnu reached out to me on Instagram, so another place that you can reach out to both Vineet and I. And he gave me a couple of questions. I picked this one to ask. So thank you, Bishnu, who's also a regular listener, and he says he really loves it and enjoys it. And he's always waiting for the next episode to drop. So Vishnu, hopefully in the next episode you get to hear your own question. This was Vishnu's question. Potu, whatever it is. Yeah.
Potu? Okay. I see you. So you had a lot of O's, a lot of letters. So now I'm going to go to something also which has a lot of letters, which is a poem. Now, how's that for a segue? Have you heard of Alexander Pope?
I have heard of this person.
Yes, so Alexander Pope, famous author and poet, had many famous poems. I'm just going to focus on one poem in particular. And this poem is called Eloisa to Abelard. The name of the poem is Eloisa to Abelard. So there are 4 lines. I'm going to specifically focus on one stanza from this poem. I'm going to tell you what the words are, and I'm going to leave out one line, and I want you to tell me which line I'm leaving out. Okay, you with me so far?
Yep.
Okay, so the first line is, how happy is the blameless Vestal's lot? The second line is, the world forgetting by the world forgot. And then the line I want you to identify. And the last line is, each prayer accepted and each wish resigned. You already know this.
I have heard of this poem.
Such a smug look. It's not a good look on you.
No, I can't even take credit for this. This is like, you encounter some things in life that just move you at such a deep level that you can't help but remember these things. Okay, that's enough. Grandstanding.
I mean, like, see, he's quite smug. He's just come from the gym and he's looking ripped and kind of, all jacked up and wearing a muscle tee and showing off all muscles and all. And the smug look, it's not going to work.
You know what to say to that, so I'm just going to tell you the answer. The answer is eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
Yes, it is right. Okay, so for our audience who may be impressed with the fact that it took me some digging to get this, but there is a poem by Alexander Pope which is called Eloisa to Abelard. It was published in 1717 and is based on a well-known medieval story inspired by the 12th century story of Eloise de Argenteuil's illicit love for and secret marriage to her teacher, Peter Abelard, who was a famous Parisian philosopher some 20 years her senior. After their affair and marriage, her family took brutal vengeance on Abelard and castrated him, following which he entered a monastery and compelled Eloise to become a nun. Both then led comparatively successful monastic careers. Years later, Abelard completed the Historia Calamitatum, which is the history of misfortune, cast as a letter of consolation to the friend. When it fell into Eloise's hands, her passion for him was reawakened, and there was an exchange of 4 letters between them written in an ornate Latin style. In Pope's poem, Eloisa confesses to the suppressed love that his letter has reawakened. So, this is the kind of context in which Alexander Pope has written this poem, and the complete stanza in continuation so that you can appreciate the sheer beauty of this poem goes as followed. How happy is the blameless Vestal's lot, the world forgetting by the world forgot. Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, each prayer accepted, each wish resigned. That's where the Jim Carrey movie gets its name. Yeah, that's the whole summary of this entire thing that I had to say. That Jim Carrey's movie came from a line from an Alexander Pope poem. And I was hoping that Aditya would be stumped, but this muscular man in front of me is just too smug.
Might I remind you, I also said Spike Lee instead of Stan Lee just a while back.
Yeah.
And I said it with so much confidence. I was like, I think I've cracked this on the first go. And I was nowhere close. Okay. That's a lovely question. Probably because it is a beautiful poem. These few lines are just so beautiful. And also that movie, oh God, that movie.
Yeah, the movie is great.
If not for the Truman Show, this would be by far my favorite Jim Carrey movie. But then Truman Show is also a pretty phenomenal movie.
How dare you The best Jim Carrey movie ever is Dumb and Dumber, followed very closely by The Mask.
Oh, I'm surprised you didn't say Ace Ventura.
Oh, now you got me confused. I'll have to put The Mask and Ace Ventura side by side.
That's a pretty valid list right there. I'll give you props for that. I actually think one of his underrated movies is Liar Liar. I think Liar Liar is just a hilarious movie.
It is hilarious. So is Me, Myself and Irene.
Also,
Yes, Man. Yeah.
There we go. We agree on that one. A phenomenal movie.
I mean, like, Jim Carrey is one of those people, everything he touches turns to gold. He had to be the Grinch in The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. And the prosthetic work was so time consuming and so suffocating that they actually had to bring in, and this is a true story, they had to bring in a CIA expert who had to teach him how to resist torture just so that he could get through this prosthetic experience, putting on the prosthetics for becoming the Grinch.
No way, you're kidding me. Is that a real piece of trivia?
It's a real thing. You look at the movie, that's actual prosthetic. It's not CGI, right? They've actually spent hours, something like 6 hours, 7 hours in the makeup chair every day just to get that on. And it was so bad that they had to actually bring in a torture expert to teach him how to resist torture, techniques to resist torture, so that he could just stand putting on all that makeup and whatnot. And he still gave a stellar performance.
My God, that's painful. That sounds painful. Okay, great. So some lovely Jim Carrey movies as recommendations, pop culture recommendations. And moving from your question about an English author, I'm going to move to something else that is English. And in this case, it is the Court of Criminal Appeal, which was an English appellate court for criminal cases established by the Criminal Appeal Act 1907. Eventually, it was superseded by the Court of Appeal of England and Wales in 1966. So it was around for close to 60 years.
Okay.
This particular court came to be because there was a lot of disquiet, a lot of public turmoil over the convictions of two people. And both of these convictions, perhaps even by common logic or common sense, seemed to be wrongful convictions and were proven eventually to be wrongful convictions as well. The first of which was a gentleman by the name of Adolf Beck. A very quick background on the Adolf Beck case, which was a notorious incident of wrongful conviction by mistaken identity brought about by unreliable methods of identification. But the other case is what we are interested in, which was the case of George Idalgi. Now, George Idalgi was an English solicitor and a son of a vicar of Indian Parsi descent in a village in England. He became known as a victim of a miscarriage of justice for having served 3 years hard labor after being convicted on a charge of injuring a pony. He was initially regarded having been responsible for the series of animal mutilations known as the Great Riley Outrages, but the prosecution case against him became regarded as weak and prejudiced, probably because of racial overtones. He was pardoned on the grounds of the conviction being an unsafe one after a campaign in which X took a prominent role. And that brings me to my question. Who is X responsible for overturning this criminal conviction and restoring justice and eventually leading to, I guess, indirectly setting up this Court of Criminal Appeal, England and Wales?
Since saying Court of Criminal Appeals is going to be quite long, I'm going to shorten it to COCA. So when did you say that COCA was established?
COCA was established in 1907 and stuck around till 1966. These two cases that I mentioned happened close to that time. I think George Idalgi's case happened in 1906.
Okay, 1906. Okay, so given the fact that this is still during the colonial era, and you said somebody of Parsi descent, I'm guessing this was a barrister of Indian origin?
That is a very solid guess. I give you props for trying to read my mind, I guess, because I would ask you a question where it would be an unexpected person. But no, it is not an Indian barrister. fighting for the justice of a man of Indian Parsi origin or descent. No, it isn't Mahatma Gandhi.
Okay. No, I was actually thinking of Jinnah, but
Okay, yeah. Neither Jinnah nor Gandhi. No. It's,
because by the 1900s, Gandhi was already in South Africa.
that is true. Yes, you are right. No, it's neither Jinnah nor Gandhi. Nobody Indian at all.
Nobody Indian. Okay. Then I would probably go into the Spencer family, Churchill.
Okay. So at this point, I'm going to give you a clue because this clue is also so beautiful. It has to be part of the question.
Okay.
X arrived to meet with Idalji at a hotel after becoming interested in the case. X recalled that he paused to study Idalji, who was passing the time reading a newspaper while waiting in the lobby. On observing how Idalji held the paper at an angle inches from his face, X was convinced that Idalji was innocent. He believed it impossible for someone with eyesight as bad as Idalji's to have moved through the countryside after nightfall, attacking animals and successfully evading the police.
Okay. Now, my next question too is very, very, very important. Is X actually a barrister?
No. No.
So then my first guess to you after all of that would be Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Ooh, brilliant crack. And I knew that hint would get you there. I'm very impressed. Yes. It is Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who, apart from, he wrote a couple of books, like, I don't know if you've heard of it, like Sherlock Holmes here and there.
Yeah, he wrote a book about Professor Challenger and a few of his friends visiting a lost world where they find dinosaurs. No, this is actually true.
What? I thought you were making some weird reference to Jurassic Park or something.
No.
Okay.
So, The Lost World, if you did not know, is an actual science fiction novel written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
Okay.
It's about an expedition to a plateau in the Amazon basin where they find prehistoric animals. And there was a character called as Professor Challenger, like Sherlock Holmes, was created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. But he's like the direct opposite of Sherlock Holmes. Holmes is controlled, very clinical, and Challenger is, big, strong, and very aggressive and angry and hot-tempered and whatnot.
Very cool. That is a lovely piece of trivia, side trivia. But coming back to the question, Arthur Conan Doyle, apart from writing some landmark and path-breaking books, also was interested in criminal justice. And much like his celebrated character Sherlock Holmes, he was known to pay close attention to detail and drawing logical inferences, as he did in this case with Idalji, which I love. It's such a brilliant way of showcasing that talent in the real world, where he noticed something about a person who was accused of a crime and just by their mannerism realized that they couldn't have possibly committed that crime because Idalji wasn't able to read the newspaper at a distance. So he had to bring it up close to his face, and Doyle assumed or surmised accurately that he would not have been able to commit those crimes on animals in the dead of night and escape the cops as well. So that is how this particular landmark case was overturned. Idalji and his conviction was overturned, and the Court of Criminal Appeal, which stood for 60 years, was established as pretty much a direct result of that case and Adolf Beck's case. What a great way for trivia and pop culture and all of it to sort of mishmash and intertwine.
Yes, and Coca was the result of all of that. Okay, that was a very good question. And moving on from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a very talented person, to another very talented person, X. X is a multi-talented artist who had the following to say during their SNL monologue. And this is the line I'm going, okay. People assume that I am like the character X simply because I wrote it. Sexually depraved, foul-mouthed. I am not a sex addict because I wrote X, but I did write Y because I am a psychopath. So who's X? That's my question.
Okay. No, I have no clue right now at all. I can't think of, and like, is it a film character?
No, so this is an actual person. And they have written two very, very famous modern day pieces of pop culture. and two very good characters, and or let's say two very good shows. I'll give you that much. Two very good shows. They're talking about those two shows. The show X, it's about a very sexually depraved and foul-mouthed character, and Y, about a psychopath.
Sexually depraved. I don't know if Barney Stinson fits that bill. But again, he was not foul-mouthed. I don't remember Barney Stinson being foul-mouthed. So probably not the right answer there. A sexually depraved character. No, man, I can't think of anything. Wow, you'll probably have to clue me in with some sort of a hint.
Okay, so this person has also been involved, I'm not going to tell you in what capacity, in the following movies and TV series, right? Broadchurch, The Iron Lady, Goodbye Christopher Robin, Solo, A Star Wars Story, No Time to Die, and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Okay. You didn't tell me in what capacity. So not necessarily as a writer. It could be in different capacities.
Yes.
Another sexually depraved and foul-mouthed character did make me think of BoJack Horseman, but I don't think that guy has...
Good guess, but no.
Yeah.
I would kind of suggest that you focus on the last three things I mentioned, the last three kind of shows and movies, because this person was in the news for being involved in these projects, which is Solo, A Star Wars Story, No Time to Die, which is Daniel Craig's final appearance as James Bond, and the final one is Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny.
Was this person by any chance, because you're mentioning it, and I don't think a lot of writers are that famous, so was this person an actor in some of these projects?
Yes. Let me just clarify again that they were an actor in some of these projects, not all.
See, I noticed something now because you said that last particular sentence. You didn't say he, you said they.
Which I have been saying.
I just noticed it now. So, which somehow leads me to the fact that it's probably not a man. And because you had said sexually depraved and foul-mouthed, I had automatically assumed, I was just thinking of male characters and a male writer. But perhaps it's not a male character or a male writer, it's a woman. Let's take a wild guess and wild stab at Fleabag. Is it Phoebe Waller-Bridge? Because I know she's appeared in Indiana Jones.
Yes, she has.
Okay. Wait, okay, so I get that X is probably Fleabag.
X is Fleabag.
What is Y?
Yeah.
So she has written something else which was a psychopath.
Yes. Fantastic show.
No, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know much of Phoebe Waller-Bridge's other work which she has written. I do love Fleabag, but I haven't seen the rest of her work.
Okay, one final clue. The show Y is a spy thriller series.
Spy thriller series. Is it a famous series?
Oh, very, very, very famous. Multiple Emmy and Golden Globe nominations.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know. What is the name of this?
So the one that I'm talking about is Killing Eve.
I've heard of it, but I've literally never even seen like a single episode.
You will have to watch at least the first couple of seasons. Jodie Comer is a revelation in that. I became a big fan of Jodie Comer after watching the show. So Killing Eve, which I'll also make as a pop culture recommendation. Killing Eve is a fantastic show. And X is Fleabag. And as you rightly guessed, the author that I'm talking about is Phoebe Waller-Bridge, who, if you did not know, also contributed to the screenplay of No Time to Die.
Oh, okay.
And she voiced a character in Solo. So let me just put all of that into context so you can actually hear the actual quote. People assume that I'm like the character Fleabag simply because I wrote it. Sexually depraved, foul-mouthed. I'm not a sex addict because I wrote Fleabag, but I did write Killing Eve because I am a psychopath.
That does sound like something Phoebe Waller-Bridge would say. Yeah, I love it. Very cool.
And Fleabag. It's another recommendation. Fantastic show.
Perfect. And also, you know what? I need to do better. I need to learn better. I should not assume that the answer would be a man just because it is sexually depraved and foul-mouthed. Women can be sexually depraved and foul-mouthed too. I don't know. I don't know if that is a feminist stance or not, but I guess that's something I should remember and take away.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for our regular questions. So let's move on to the end of our episode and the audience question which I asked at the beginning of today's episode. Which word meaning to plan together secretly is derived from the Latin for breathe with or breathe together, having the same root as the word respiration? So, Aditya.
I would imagine it is conspire.
Yes, conspiracy or conspire. The noun conspiracy came into English from the Anglo-Norman French word conspiracy, which derived from the Latin word conspirar, meaning to agree or plot. The prefix con means with, while spirar means to breathe, suggesting an image of people who are so close together while plotting that their breaths mingle.
Okay. So that is a pretty great audience question because it reminds me of this trivia I encountered about how breathing and the Latin for spirar has led to so many different words, right? So obviously respiration and perspiration, which perspiration is breathe through because you're breathing through your skin.
Yeah.
But there are so many other words. There is also when you're striving and reaching for something, you're breathing to that thing, that becomes aspire. So that is where aspiration comes from. Yeah. And if you found yourself influenced by an idea or purpose, that is an idea breathed into you, that is inspired.
Nice.
So that is how it was breathed into you. Breathing with a person, obviously, like you said, conspire, because you're doing it with, con with. And when you die, you literally and figuratively breathe out your last breath, which is why you expire. Yeah. So breathing was associated with the concept of life itself. And that's where the word spirit also comes from, by the way. So a lot of interesting etymologies from just that spirar.
Yes. So what's your pop culture recommendation, Aditya?
Oh, I'm going to do a few. I'm very excited this week because a lot of lovely things have happened. I firstly started off by watching Angry Young Men, which is on Amazon Prime. It is a TV series, and this talks about Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar, two people who have featured as a question on our podcast before. Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar. And it talks about their meteoric rise and pretty much how they changed the face of Bollywood and Hindi cinema in India with their series of hits. I believe 22 out of the 24 films that they wrote together were smash hits, and some of the most iconic names that you can think of.
Sholay, Shan,
Zanjeer and Diwar and Dawn, just all of these very, very iconic films pretty much established that angry young man, which is also where this name of the show comes from, angry young man trope of Amitabh Bachchan, which solidified him as the superstar of his era. Turns out, and this is just a little bit of a spoiler from the show, but hey, it's a docuseries, so spoilers don't count. But in one of the films, they asked the producers that they want to be paid 1 lakh rupees more, and a lakh back then was a big deal, 1 lakh rupees more than the highest billed star, which in this case was Amitabh Bachchan. So they got paid, I think Amitabh Bachchan got paid 21 lakhs or 20 lakhs, and they got paid 1 lakh more, just 21 or 22, whatever.
Wow.
They were paid more than the lead actor, who at this time was the peak of his stardom. And that's the kind of money that they could command because they were pretty much guaranteed to produce a hit at the box office. That's just a taste of the kind of fun, interesting history that you get to see in this particular show. So I would highly recommend Prime Video Angry Young Men, the story of Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar. Salim Javed, as they were known. The other pop culture recommendation I have is a movie I watched, Choked. I had not even heard of it, just showed up on my Netflix recommendation. Great film. I really enjoyed it. I don't want to give too much of a spoiler, but it talks about society and culture and politics in a very interesting way. Also has some lovely allegorical, metaphorical sort of representation of how society struggles. And this is directed and co-produced by Anurag Kashyap.
Oh.
And I was surprised, yeah, just like you. I had no idea that he made this film. More than the direction, by the way, I gotta give a shout out to the actors. Just phenomenal acting all across the board. Sammy Kher and Roshan Matthew just stole my heart in this film. Phenomenal acting. The other two recommendations I'm going to make from pop culture are going to be two things that are back. They are happening again, and I'm extremely excited about it. Crash Course, which is how John Green and Hank Green shot to fame. Well, they also shot to fame with the Vlog Brothers, but Crash Course also gave them a lot of prominence on YouTube back in the day. John Green is hosting Crash Course all over again, and this time it's a crash course on religion. I'm very excited about this. Watch Crash Course, all of those stuff that they've posted in the past, especially the John Green stuff. I've always enjoyed that, history and whatnot. And look out for Crash Course on Religion, which is going to be released soon. The other thing that is back on, and I think I've recommended it in the past, but here's another shout out to this, is Every Frame a Painting, a YouTube channel which talks about movies. And the guy who used to make it, Tony Zhou, I believe, a Canadian editor, he had stopped making these videos 6-7 years ago. And I remember there was a post on Medium or some blog where he talked about how he was done with it because it was too taxing and took too much of effort and he didn't want to go back to it. And it broke my heart because it was one of those first video essay channels just purely dedicated to film on YouTube that I loved. And the cinephile in me used to love looking forward to any new video. And he posted a video very recently, just out of the blue. And there's a new video of Every Frame a Painting out again in the last, I think, week or 2 weeks. And I'm very excited. I'm hoping Tony Zhou is back to posting videos again. So check out the old videos, check out the new video. I think it's a video called Two Shot. So he's talking about the two shot where it's a shot where there are two people in the same shot. And he talks about that. The last recommendation I'm going to make, and I don't even know if this is a pop culture recommendation, but I'm going to say this, is a food item. It's called Nach Chips. And
what?
If you live in India and you have access to Blinkit or Dunzo or whatever, you should order yourself some Nach Chips. Trust me, they're not paying me for this. I've just been eating so much of this recently that I want people to try it out. It is prohibitively expensive. It is going to break my bank very soon because a single packet costs like 300 rupees. So yeah, don't buy them too much. But buy one packet and check it out. It is truly something worth checking out. And as we have never done before, I'm going to do this one time. I'm going to recommend a food item. Nach, Natch, Nach Chips. Go check those out.
Wow. That was different. But hey, variety is the spice of life. Get it? Spice, chips.
Hey,
yeah,
nice.
Right. Okay, so my recommendation is already including two of the things I've mentioned, which is Killing Eve and Fleabag. And coming back to the kind of things that I've consumed recently, there is a show which I really wanted to recommend called Gyara Gyara, which is the Hindi for 1111. It is an adaptation of the Korean series Signal. Now, I'd watched the original Korean series Signal many years ago, and I really loved it at the time. And this is a very, very good adaptation, and starring Raghav Jayal, who I think we have mentioned on the podcast before about the movie Kill. And I recently kind of just put it together. I don't know if you remember, Aditya. Do you remember around 10 years ago, there was this viral clip of this dude who appeared on a dance show and started doing this kind of slow motion walk?
I believe you're talking about Croc Rose.
Yes, Croc Rose. I did not put together that Croc Rose was Raghav Jayal.
I used to dance a lot more back then. I don't as much anymore. So being on YouTube and watching dance videos was pretty much like most of what I did with my day. And the Croc Rose videos were something I obsessed over with. I tried to do it so many times in my dorm room, in my college, just skipping class and just trying to do that move where he walks, slow motion walks up. And I believe it is Madhuri Dixit or somebody who is a guest judge in that episode, and he gives her a flower. Yeah. He does that in this beautiful slow motion move. And I thought, oh God, if only one day I can do it. And who knew this man had so many other talents as well?
Yeah, I mean, he's quite natural. So Gyara Gyara, I would also recommend that you can try and watch the original Korean show on which it is based. It's called Signal. Another one I wanted to recommend, actually this just came off the top of my head because of Aditya's question about Sir Arthur Conan Doyle using his powers of observation to prove the innocence of a wrongly convicted person. And there's a movie that I was immediately reminded of called Primal Fear, which is starring Edward Norton in one of his first few roles and Richard Gere as an attorney. I'm going to say nothing more, just watch the movie. You are not going to be disappointed.
It's one of those movies that was ruined for me because I saw the Hindi adaptation of it.
Oh, there's a Hindi adaptation of it?
There is a Hindi adaptation of it, and it is a bad adaptation. It was very annoying. That movie was ruined for me in this terrible, terrible way.
Let's not put out the name of the Hindi adaptation here. So Primal Fear, Gyara Gyara, which is basically the Hindi for 1111, which is a remake of the original Korean show Signal, and Fleabag and Killing Eve. That's, I think, quite enough from me this week?
That is a lot of pop culture recommendations, and I feel bad, but I have to give a shout out once more to Arjun's recommendation, which was Blistering Barnacles, The Rambles and Rages of Captain Haddock, a coffee table book. Sounds interesting. I haven't seen it, but Arjun recommends it. Check it out.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we spoke about extensively, some Jim Carrey movies. So literally just go Google best Jim Carrey movies and watch all of them.
So many Jim Carrey movies. Yeah.
I'll give you a non-recommendation. You already said the Bollywood film that is an adaptation of Primal Fear. Don't watch that. I'm not going to name that. You know, another movie that was ruined for me, Usual Suspects. Vineet, Usual Suspects.
You watched Chocolate. Oh God, I feel so bad for you. When it comes to movie watching, for me, there was a time before I watched Usual Suspects and the time after I watched it. Kaiser Soze literally blew my mind. I did not see that ending coming.
Anybody who says that they did is lying. That is a straight up lie. Perfect. Lovely long list of recommendations.
We do this for you. We watch it so that you also have to. So now that's all for this episode. Thank you for listening in. We hope you enjoyed the show and learned something new. If you liked what you heard, please consider subscribing to our podcast and leaving us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Most of you guys who listen to us are not subscribed. Please subscribe to us. It'll take a few seconds to do so. It helps us reach a wider audience, allows more people to discover and enjoy the show. We'd also love to hear from you. Just like Arjun did, you can send us questions at areyouquizzingme@gmail.com with the name of the quizmaster who you want to ask the question in the subject line. Or you can send it to us on Instagram, our private Instagram, or at areyouquizzingme. We also have a community at subreddit, which is r/areyouquizzingme. You can go there and join other fans of the show and discuss whatever you want. We appreciate your support and look forward to sharing more episodes with you in the future. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Have a great day.
See you guys next week.